Right now, as you read this, there's a process running silently on your Android phone that you did not install, did not authorize, and cannot easily find. It does not show up on your home screen. It has no icon. It produces no notification. But it is awake. It is listening. It is watching. It knows your location. It has read your messages. And the organization that originally engineered this technology, it isn't some basement hacker in Eastern Europe. According to declassified intelligence documents that shook the entire world, it was your own government. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented history. And tonight, it gets worse. There is a question that most people are afraid to ask out loud, not because the answer is complicated, but because the answer is real. The question is this: who is actually watching you through your phone? Not in the abstract sense that we throw around at dinner parties or laugh off on social media, but literally, technically, right now. Because if you think the answer is nobody, then what you are about to learn is going to fundamentally change how you look at the device in your hand, the one you carry everywhere, the one that sits beside you while you sleep, the one that has been with you in your most private moments for the last several years. Let's start where this story actually begins. Not in some anonymous hacker forum, not in the dark corners of the internet, but in Langley, Virginia, inside the CIA's own Center for Cyber Intelligence. Because in March 2017, something happened that the intelligence community called a catastrophe, that the rest of the world called a revelation. WikiLeaks published what it described as the largest leak of classified CIA documents in history. They called it Vault 7. The initial release, codenamed Year Zero, consisted of 8,161 documents and files taken from an isolated, high-security network inside the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence. 8,761 files. Let that number settle for a moment. Because inside those files was not just a list of tactics or general strategies. Inside those files was a complete working blueprint of how America's most powerful intelligence agency had built an entire invisible empire. Inside the phones, televisions, cars, and computers of people across the entire planet. Think about what that means. This was not theoretical capability. This was operational reality. The documents detail the CIA's development of malware, viruses, Trojans, and weaponized zero-day exploits capable of compromising operating systems such as iOS, Android, Windows, OS X, and Linux, as well as turning internet-connected devices like Samsung smart televisions into covert listening posts through projects such as Weeping Angel. By 2016, the CIA had reportedly amassed over 1,000 distinct implants, producing 100 to 300 new weapons annually. 1,000 implants. And one of the most terrifying details hidden inside those documents was this: the CIA had not just built these weapons. They had lost control of them. The tools were out, and once a cyber weapon leaves the building, it cannot be recalled. But here's where it gets worse. WikiLeaks claimed that by infecting smartphones, the CIA could get around the encryption technologies of popular apps, such as WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, Weibo, and Confide, by collecting communications before they were encrypted. Read that again slowly. Before they were encrypted. That means it did not matter how secure your messaging app was. It did not matter if you used the most advanced end-to-end encryption on the market. If the device itself was compromised, if the operating system was already infected at the root level, then your messages were being read before the encryption even had a chance to protect them. The lock on your door meant nothing, because someone had already climbed through the window. Now, you might be sitting there thinking this was years ago, 2017, ancient history in technology terms. Surely this has been fixed. Surely this is no longer relevant. This is exactly the thought that the people behind these systems are counting on. Because what happened after Vault 7 was not a cleanup. What happened was proliferation. By 2025, the exposure of these methods had contributed to an escalated global cyber arms race, where leaked source code and operational logic from Vault 7 informed hybrid warfare strategies, with state actors such as Russia and China adapting and deploying similar tools without the developmental costs originally borne by the US. The CIA built the weapon. The CIA lost the weapon. And now multiple governments, criminal organizations, and commercial companies have rebuilt versions of that same weapon and are deploying them against ordinary people every single day. And this is where everything changes, because we are no longer talking about a government intelligence program targeting foreign adversaries. We are talking about a commercial ecosystem of surveillance software that has normalized the invisible monitoring of private individuals, has been downloaded millions of times, and in many cases is sitting right now on devices owned by people who have absolutely no idea it is there. These tools have names that sound harmless. They market themselves as parental control applications. They present themselves as employee monitoring solutions. They show up in app stores wrapped in clean design and reassuring language. But underneath that interface is something very different from what the packaging suggests. What most people are not seeing is the scale of what has been uncovered just in the last 12 months alone. In early 2025, Spyzy, CocoSpy, and Spike, three of the most widely used consumer surveillance platforms, were compromised, with data leaks affecting millions, including victim data. Some services went offline afterward. But here is the detail that the mainstream coverage consistently buried. The breach did not just expose the people being watched, it exposed the people doing the watching. Because these platforms kept records on both sides, the stalker and the target, and when their servers collapsed, all of that data became publicly accessible. The breach exposed 518,643 Spyzy user email addresses, 81 million CocoSpy user email addresses, and 881,167 Spike user email addresses, along with private data stolen from victims, including messages and photos. 3 platforms, over 3 million people, exposed in a single event. And this is just one breach in 1 year from one cluster of interconnected applications. The real story is that this is not exceptional. This is the pattern. TechCrunch has documented that the Vault 7 breach is the 25th mobile surveillance software to have suffered a breach or exposed victim or user data since 2017, 25 times, in less than a decade. The surveillance industry has built an infrastructure that is simultaneously invasive and insecure, capable of stealing everything from you, while being completely incapable of protecting what it steals. SpyX, a platform that markets itself as, and these are their own words, the best phone monitoring app, suffered its own breach, compromising the data of nearly 2 million people, including 17,000 Apple iCloud credentials that were being used to monitor targets silently through cloud. Synchronization. Neither the targets of the spyware nor the customers of the software were ever notified of the breach, which reportedly occurred in June 2024. Nobody told the victims. Nobody warned the users. The data simply sat there, exposed, while the company said nothing. This is not chaos. This is an industry operating without accountability, and it goes deeper than any individual platform. Because these tools are not just being deployed by jealous partners or paranoid employers. According to informed sources within the cybersecurity research community, state-sponsored actors have been using commercially available stalkerware as cover, embedding their own code inside already installed surveillance platforms to double-layer their access to targets. Why build expensive proprietary infrastructure when millions of people have already voluntarily installed the delivery mechanism on their own phones? Spyware tools including Bad Bazaar and Moonshine, which researchers at Citizen Lab, Lookout, Trend Micro, and Velexity have analyzed in detail, hid inside legitimate-looking Android apps, acting essentially as Trojan malware, with surveillance capabilities, including the ability to access the phone's cameras, microphone, chats, photos, and location data. These were not rogue amateur operations. These were sophisticated campaigns with geopolitical objectives, wrapped inside apps that looked completely normal to any casual user. Now, let's talk about what these things actually do when they're on your device. Because the technical details matter here, not as abstract concepts, but as a precise inventory of how much of your life is being extracted without your permission. Mobile spyware can secretly track your GPS location, read your texts and emails, listen to phone calls, activate your microphone or camera, and harvest data from apps like WhatsApp, Messenger, or Instagram, all without you knowing. But the methodology runs even deeper than active surveillance. On Android devices, spyware often uses extensive surveillance tools. It can record audio or video via your phone, or read your browsing history and location data, or operate as a keylogger that captures every single keystroke. Every single keystroke. That means your passwords, your bank pins, your private messages to your doctor, your conversations with your lawyer, the things you search for at 2 a.m. when nobody else is awake. All of it recorded, packaged, and transmitted to a remote server owned by someone you have never met, operating in a jurisdiction that may have zero legal accountability to you. And here is the architectural detail that most people never consider. These applications are specifically engineered to be invisible. Once installed, stalkerware typically removes its app icon, runs silently in the background, and sends collected data to an online dashboard accessible via the vendor's website. There is no icon on your home screen. There is no process with a suspicious name in your task manager. The app disguises itself as a system service, something that sounds technical and legitimate and unremarkable. And even more sinister, stalkerware is often designed to resist removal, for example, by blocking access to system settings or requiring a password set by the abuser to uninstall it. It locks itself in. Once it is on your device, it fights to stay there, because the entire business model depends on the target never knowing. Think about what that means for a single moment. There is software that was specifically designed by engineers who were paid a salary to make it impossible for you to remove something from your own phone. That is the product. That is the deliberate, intentional design goal, not to protect you, not to serve you, but to trap you inside a surveillance cage that you can see but cannot open. Now, here's the question that the security industry has been forced to confront in the most uncomfortable possible way. What is actually protecting you against this? A 2025 evaluation conducted jointly by digital rights group, EFF, and independent antivirus testing firm, AV Comparatives, tested 13 leading mobile security products against 17 real-world stalkerware samples. The results were disturbing. Google Play Protect, Android's built-in security solution, detected just 53% of the samples tested. That is the lowest score of all products evaluated. Let that settle. The default security system that comes installed on every Android device, the one that Google tells you is protecting you, the one that most people have never looked past or questioned, it missed nearly half of the real-world spy tools thrown at it. If you are relying on Play Protect alone, and most Android users are, then you have approximately a coin flip's chance of being protected against a targeted surveillance attack. According to informed sources in the cybersecurity space, this failure rate is not an accident. It is a structural consequence of how these detection systems are built. Google Play Protect is optimized for broad, mass-scale malware. It is looking for viruses that spread. Stalkerware, by contrast, does not spread. It sits still, it is quiet, it mimics legitimate behavior. It exploits legitimate system features like accessibility services and device administrator permissions, features that are genuinely used by real apps for real purposes. And that camouflage is precisely what makes it so difficult to detect with a system that was never designed to look for it. Many stalkerware apps abuse Android's accessibility services to read on-screen content. An unknown service with full accessibility permissions is highly suspicious, and yet most users never look at their accessibility settings. Most users have never opened that menu because nobody told them to. Nobody ever explained that the same permission that helps visually impaired users navigate their phone is also the exact mechanism being used by surveillance software to read every word appearing on your screen in real time. Here is what an informed observer actually looks for. A mysterious process with high battery usage while the device is idle is suspicious. Increased mobile data usage is another signal. Receiving text messages with random numeric or character strings from unknown senders could be linked to spyware. Certain spyware apps use hidden SMS commands for remote control. These are not dramatic red flags. They're quiet anomalies. The kind of things most people rationalize away. My battery is just getting old. I must have left something streaming. That weird text was probably spam. And in most cases, that rationalization is exactly correct. But in a meaningful number of cases, a number that the data tells us is growing every single year, that rationalization is wrong. And the cost of being wrong is everything. Kaspersky recorded 29% more attacks against Android users in the first half of 2025 compared to the same period in 2024, with particularly active Trojan families and new campaigns. 29% more, year over year. The threat is not declining. The threat is accelerating. Because the tools are cheap, the market is large, the legal accountability is minimal, and the detection gap remains wide enough to drive entire criminal enterprises through. And now we need to talk about something that the headlines consistently underreport. Because the conversation around surveillance software almost always focuses on the victim, on the person being watched. But the 2025 breaches revealed something that reframes the entire picture. The people deploying these tools are also in danger. Every individual who has purchased a stalkerware subscription, installed it on someone else's device, and logged into a dashboard to monitor their target. The person's information is also stored on the same insecure servers. Their email address, their IP address, the device information of their targets, their method of payment. And when those servers are compromised, which, as we have now established, happens with remarkable regularity, all of that becomes exposed. In February 2025, 3 stalkerware apps went offline following a data breach, with speculation that the shutdown was intended to avoid legal repercussions over the data leak. The companies simply disappeared. They did not notify their customers. They did not warn their victims. They turned off the lights and walked away, leaving millions of people with data floating unprotected in the wreckage of servers they no longer controlled. This is not a niche problem. This is not something happening to other people in other countries with different threat profiles than yours. The commercial surveillance ecosystem has become so normalized, so embedded in the ordinary app economy, that the boundary between a legitimate productivity tool and a covert monitoring platform has essentially dissolved. And the intelligence methodology that the CIA pioneered, the approach of compromising the device at the operating system level so that encryption becomes irrelevant, has now been replicated, commercialized, and made available to anyone with a credit card and a willing vendor. What most people are not seeing is that we have built a world where the surveillance capabilities that once required the resources of a nation-state intelligence agency are now accessible to private individuals, commercial enterprises, and criminal organizations with a modest budget and a basic technical understanding. The democratization of surveillance, that is what Vault 7 ultimately unleashed on the world, not just the specific tools that were documented in those 8,761 files, but the knowledge that this level of compromise was possible, was operational, and could be replicated. Removal of spyware requires a structured security approach: airplane mode, safe mode, revoking device administrator access, running a professional anti-malware scan, and in serious cases, performing a clean factory reset. Those are the technical steps. But the broader action is awareness. It is understanding that your phone is not just a convenience device. It is a surveillance surface. It is a data collection endpoint. And the question of who has access to that endpoint is not answered simply by looking at the apps you knowingly downloaded. It requires a deeper audit. It requires looking at what has been given accessibility permissions. It requires examining which applications have been granted device administrator access. Android users who suspect compromise can attempt to detect hidden apps by entering a specific code, followed by pressing the call button, which may prompt hidden applications to reveal themselves if installed. That is a documented detection method that has existed for years, and the vast majority of Android users have never heard of it because nobody told them. Because the systems designed to protect them have been built around different threat models, and because the surveillance industry has invested enormously in staying invisible. The man who leaked Vault 7, the CIA software developer who handed those 8,161 documents to WikiLeaks, was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. The sentencing judge described his actions as a digital Pearl Harbor that caused untold damage to national security. 40 years for releasing documents that proved the government had built an arsenal of tools to secretly compromise the private devices of people around the world. Think about that structural reality. The act of building the surveillance infrastructure was protected and funded and classified. The act of revealing it was punished with 4 decades of imprisonment. That tells you everything you need to know about where the institutional priorities lie. That tells you exactly how much weight the official system places on your right to know that your phone has been turned into a microphone. And so here we are. In 2025, in a world where a 29% year-over-year increase in Android attacks is a statistic buried in a security company's quarterly report, where Google's own built-in protection misses half of real-world surveillance tools, where 3 major spyware platforms compromise the data of millions of people in a single breach and then simply shut down without warning anyone, where the tools originally developed inside the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence have been reverse-engineered, replicated, and commercialized into a sprawling global industry that operates in plain sight, markets itself on legitimate platforms, and has embedded itself so deeply into the app economy that most people would not recognize it if they were looking directly at it. The device in your pocket is not passive. It has never been passive. The question has never been whether it can be used to watch you. The CIA proved in documented detail that it can. The question has always been who currently holds that access, and whether you would even know if they did. Tonight, before you set your phone down on your nightstand, before it sits beside you in the dark and the quiet, it might be worth asking yourself that question one more time. And this time, asking it like you actually want to know the answer. Because the people who built these systems are counting on the fact that you won't, and the people who lost control of them are counting on the fact that by now you have forgotten to care. The only question left is, which side of that calculation are you on?